I am joined from Christiansburg, Virginia, by my doppelganger, Wyatt Reed, who I told to look as much like me as possible for this interview. We're both very embarrassed by this. We want to both apologize collectively to the audience. We didn't mean this to happen. Wyatt pointed it out when we started talking. We won't let it happen again. I could change shirts, but I'm not going to. I think the content is more important here. So I am joined from Christiansburg, West Virginia. Virginia, excuse me. I was trying to make you even more American. My gosh. By Wyatt Reed, who is managing editor. Is that the title?
Just editor.
Editor at the Gray Zone, which people who know me know I'm a huge fan of and I've done a lot of work with. And at Icarus Festival this August 23rd, we will be having an entire Gray Zone day featuring Wyatt Reed and others from the Gray Zone. I so Wyatt, I've been a fan of your work since I first heard about you. I guess is probably when you were in Donbass, in the Donbass, reporting from there. I think that's when I first heard of you, which was 2023. But I also, you gave a wonderful speech at the Rage Against the War Machine rally in DC a couple years ago. And I was really taken by it because you started with talking about your childhood growing up in Virginia, and you live in a nearby where you grew up in Virginia, and how I guess that informed your sort of political consciousness and why you've chosen to do the things you've done. You've since then, since you were a child in Radford, Virginia, you have been a journalist, a reporter, and I guess would you call yourself, I mean, an anti-imperialist? I mean, or do you even want to
That's
do that?
fair.
Yeah. I want to like make these things sound not weird to the average American. I mean, I use it all the time. I call myself an anti,
Right.
but then I'm like, yeah, but like my neighbors, are they gonna when they hear that, what are they gonna think, right?
Yeah, what's the practical upshot of being a man, as someone who's an anti-imperialist? I don't think a lot of people really spend too much time
I
thinking
mean,
through that phrase on a daily basis, but I take your point.
yeah, well, I mean, I think it conjures in the minds of most Americans probably, images of Che Guevara,
Right.
or that sort of typical, what we used to call the third worldist left,
Right.
which is still around. But yeah,
Yeah.
and I do we're going to talk about this a lot because you've reported from multiple countries. I was about to say that, countries that no other journalist will go to, the ones that are the most important to visit. It's nice. Paris is great, but we really
Right.
need to see the places where we don't visit that we're bombing. And that's where you've spent a lot of time. We're going to talk about that too. So let's start with, yeah, growing up in Virginia, Bible Belt, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, we're in the Appalachians, so that means it's predominantly fairly conservative, pretty rural, mountainous. Where I am specifically is a little closer to a university. So it's kind of this weird blend of red and blue. I'm
Mm,
kind of right on the cusp of where the red meets the blue geographically.
right.
So it's an interesting place. You kind of have a lot of ideas meeting and especially culturally, and the natural sort of contradictions that come from that. Um, so yeah, I guess as an elementary schooler, I was more in the rural schools, and then in middle and high school, I was in the kind of
Oh,
town, college educated town schools. So I've had a little bit of a mix of everything in terms of my education,
hmm.
and I think that color is probably my journalism and my reporting and I feel like I have a fairly strong ability to empathize with most people, probably in part because of that. So that was kind of my childhood, was kind of in between the rural and the urban, or not so much urban, but um, college town,
Yeah.
uh, which is culturally certainly more urban than rural in terms of the kind of political alignment as well.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
and moving on to my, I guess, kind of political development. I guess in middle and high school, I kind of dabbled in, um, you know, '60s
Commie shit.
comic shit, steal this book, Abby Hoffman, that kind of stuff, and
Yeah, yeah.
reading
Mm.
um,
Wait a second. Wait a second.
Eduardo Galeano and things like
Hold
that.
on. Wait a
Sure.
minute. The commie shit, was Abby Hoffman like prominent for you?
Not
Because
terribly,
that's
but that was just kind of my entree into that world, I guess,
oh,
in high school.
there's no better for me, for my politics.
Yeah,
There's no better entree into politics than Abby Hoffman. I mean, on the left anyway. Like if you're going to be
right,
a leftist, go with Abby Hoffman first, which is
right.
that's interesting. I was not expecting that. Who's and then Galliano? Tell me
Yeah,
about
sure.
him.
I mean, before that, I think probably a better kind of segue. Since I was a kid, I had an interest in newspapers and
Me too.
journalism in general,
Hmm.
which I became alternately disillusioned with various occasions, as
Hmm.
I got older. Um, but yeah, besides that, I mean, Kurt Vonnegut, things like that.
Very cool.
Uh, who am I thinking of?
Hmm.
Fear and Loathing. He did
Oh,
on the
Hunter S.
campaign
Thompson.
trail. Hunter S. Thompson,
Yeah,
Fear
yeah,
and
yeah.
Loathing on the campaign
Okay.
trail.
Okay.
Um, so
That's
kind of
good.
political criticism, very very pointed political criticism,
Yeah.
um, but funny. That was kind of
Yeah.
where I entered into the fray.
Oh, wow.
And um, after high school, I had an interest. I was in an interesting position in that I guess I probably didn't take high school as seriously as I should have, according to a lot of people. Um, and so I had, I was really good at standardized tests and that kind of thing, but my grades were not great. Um, so, I was going to be a national merit scholar, but I
Wow.
was one of those, of all, out of the, 32 or 60 something, whatever they select, they pick, I think it's one or two, and they who just have like the worst GPA or whatever, and they yank them off the list. So I was one of the guys that was just
Wow.
almost there, but not quite. And so
Hmm.
this was a period of time when I graduated in 2010. And so right around this same time also, my granddad had made a promise when I was a kid to kind of help pay for me and my brother's college. And this in 2007, 2008, the recession happened, and basically all of my granddad's money was invested in
Ouch.
a regional bank called Wachovia,
Oh man.
which for
I know it. Yep.
the non-banking inclined viewers was bought up by Wells Fargo for like a penny on the dollar, maybe less. So it kind of felt like at that point in time that maybe I wasn't supposed to go to college. And I had a friend who put me in touch with a kind of kooky professor in Nicaragua who was running
Hmm.
a a biological research station slash hostel. And so I thought that sounded very cool. It's on a volcanic lake in Nicaragua. And I emailed them, and they said, normally, people who want to come volunteer and stuff, we charge them such and such amount of money. I said, well, I don't have that, but maybe I can cook and clean and stuff. And so I did that for a year or so. And that was kind of my how I got into Latin America and how I started speaking Spanish.
And that's when you
How
were 18?
17.
17. You were in
Yeah.
Nicaragua. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of you went to college in Nicaragua in a sense. That was your college?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that true though? I mean, did you get educated or were you self-educated when you were there? Did you get recruited
Uh,
by the Sandinistas, Wyatt?
unfortunately, I was not. They were not the most. And to this day, probably not the most. How shall we say, gringo friendly
Friendly?
media.
Yeah.
Kind
Oh,
of. They
really?
don't really seem to spend too much time ingratiating themselves to the Western public,
Hmm.
for better or for worse. I certainly can't blame them. It hasn't really done too many people too much good historically.
Right.
But yeah, so no, I think just being in a country like that that's lived through dictatorship and lived through a revolution, and still has plenty of people who can tell you what both were like.
Yeah.
That was an interesting experience. And
But I mean, were you around lefties,
I was a
Sandinistas, or
I think,
no?
well, certainly my boss was one of those guys who, the gringos who came down in the 80s, who they called them the Sandinistas.
Right.
A lot of them, never left, and had families and have kids there. Um,
Hmm.
but he was one of those kinds of people, and so he was, certainly a leftist, of some kind, and certainly believed in the Sandinistas. And I remember him showing me a picture that he took with Jimmy Carter when he came to Nicaragua, I think. And he and some of the, I remember one of my coworkers there is a guy named Lorenzo who, um, very very poor background. All these people I worked with were just working class Nicaraguans, but he had been one of the he he, um, he told me a bit about the so-called, um, how do you say this in English? The alphabetization brigades, the literacy brigades.
Oh. Mhm.
Um, so he had been taken part in going across the country and teaching people of all ages, and different backgrounds how to read, which was a huge problem in Nicaragua after the revolution, because it was only something like a quarter of the population was literate.
Wow.
Um, and so, now today, it's a massive achievement. It's closer to 80, to 90%. And functional literacy has basically been achieved for the most of the population, to where
Uh,
when they see a road sign, it's not like it's written in Chinese or something. People know how to interact with written goods in their written
so,
materials in their day-to-day life.
at the expense of being called a commie, I'm going to say, the classic retort to that would be, yeah, it's much higher than the United States. The literacy rate now, it's actually unclear, but it looks like it's around half. I mean, it's and in terms of what people read an entire book in the US, right?
Right.
It's not even more than half. Um,
Certainly.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, like you hear this about the Cuban medical system, how it's actually better than the American one, et cetera. And maybe in some ways. But I mean, for me, doesn't mean I
Yeah.
want to trade this fucked up system for that one. Um, I don't want to trade whatever the ideology I live under now for Fidel Castro's ideology. The Sandinistas, I mean, we don't get into the nitty gritty of it, but what were your thoughts about socialism, communism, the Sandinistas? I mean, as you're sort of living in it.
Well, to be honest, as a 17, 18-year old, I guess at first I was kind of like, oh, well, they did pretty good. And then I got to be kind of soured on it. I was kind of thinking, well, this isn't real socialism, because they have billboards up, and they don't have kind of workers collectives running everything and stuff like that. And,
Mm, mm,
I kind of took what you might call an ultra left
mm,
perspective,
hmm
when I was younger, when I was first there. This isn't what Che Guevara would have wanted. Um,
right,
which is obviously kind of an absurd metric to have for, whether or not something is socialism, or the more important question of, is it functioning for
right,
the least fortunate people in that society.
right.
Um, and so, you know, I I traveled around the country, uh, and met, a lot of people who had at the end of this year. Um, I went with a friend, and uh, we had he had put me onto this book by Stephen Kinzer called Blood of Brothers. That's a
The
um,
Dulles brothers? Is that?
No,
Oh,
it's Blood of Brothers is about the Sandinista revolution, and it just chronicles his travels and his coverage of the Civil War, the Dirty War, the U.S. imposed Dirty War is, I think, a better way to describe it. Um, and when I was traveling around with this friend, we realized, plenty of these people are still alive. We can go talk to them. We can go interview them if we want, and just kind of, see what they have to say, see what they're up to. And so we spent a month before I came back, 2010, just traveling around the country and, in bus rides and boat rides and just kind of going all over.
hmm, hmm.
Uh, and I think it was clear to me even then that you could still sort of feel the outline of these kind of, like the political infrastructure that had been laid by the CIA, by the West. You could still sort of feel the contours, the water lines. You could sort of see, you know, the limitations of it, and you were still dealing with the effects of it, and especially on the Caribbean coast, where Ronald Reagan famously said, "I am a Mosquito Indian." He
All right.
had this. It was kind of the origins of the CIA subversion of indigenous and ethnic struggles. In many ways, you can really sort of paint
Oh,
the playbook that you see in color revolutions now back
oh,
to Nicaragua and back to the mosquitoes. And I mean, the
oh,
same way. Well, they had experience with the Hmong and and in Vietnam and Laos and um, but but in terms of kind of subverting a socialist project or a national project through specifically ethnic tensions and lines, that was really their um, that was
whoa.
kind of their magnum opus.
So meaning they were doing a color revolution among the indigenous people.
Meaning
The
in the
CIA was
1980s,
recruiting
the
people and
1980s, yeah, they selected specifically. Well, they basically searched for who are the groups who are most likely to have a grievance with the central government, or who are most likely to be able to be weaponized against
right,
the central government, and you know various indigenous groups, Afro Caribbeans. They very quickly learned, okay, race lines. They are these long-standing, racial lines that we can
hmm,
very easily manipulate to our advantage. Say that the Sandinistas aren't actually really interested in including, black people or indigenous people, and this was fairly successful in terms of creating the Contra. When people talk about Contras, they tend to think about um, the westerns, the western half of the country sort of conflict, in between the mestizo and the Latino population and the other
right,
anti-communist Latino population.
right.
But in the early '80s, there was a huge push to incorporate the Afro Caribbeans, the indigenous, into this, counter revolution,
Huh.
the democratic movement,
Didn't know that.
and
Hmm.
and so, I was able. I had some really fascinating conversations sometimes with one indigenous leader who I spent a couple weeks hanging out with, and he at one point asked me if I could get him in touch with this anthropologist who he said had been his connection to the CIA. And he said, "Oh, he used to take me up to key parties in San Francisco, and we used to have a wild time." And I could barely
Wait,
believe what I was hearing. But
wait,
this is,
what's a key party again?
I think it's when I'm not sure this.
Oh,
I thought it was an urban
it's like
legend, but
swinging. It's like
yeah,
swinging.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
put
yeah.
your keys in a fishbowl. and whoever's wife pulls out a key and they go home with that guy, I guess.
You know what?
uh
That only happens among CIA operatives. It's
I
otherwise it's
think
never.
so. In the real world, I didn't think that
No one
happened,
else.
but
It's only CIA guys do that stuff.
CIA guys in San Francisco apparently.
Well, they have a history of doing pretty much that, right? MK Ultra, I mean, was drugging
Well, yeah,
people and yeah, I mean,
they ran a brothal for a while where they fed
yes,
LSD to the Johns in
in San
San
Francisco.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very possible, right? Wow. So they really, but at the very least, it looked to you clear that the CIA was involved with this guy, the indigenous.
No, it
Oh.
was very clear that he wanted to get back in touch with the CIA,
Oh.
and me, as a random interested gringo, was
Oh.
going to be the guy to do it.
Oh,
You
he
know
wanted it
that
because
he was like missing. Kind of. He said, "Oh, did you happen to know how to get in touch with?" You know,
right.
um,
Because they were paying him or because of the Key Party.
I kind of think the latter. I didn't ask, but I I kind of felt more like the
So
latter than the
so
former.
wait a minute. So you're saying he wasn't terribly politically committed? I mean, what
Uh,
is that what
I
is that the
I
upshot
mean,
here? Like,
I think that he really did. He was, and I don't really even want to use his name too much, uh, because I I think that he really did. He had legitimate grievances, and he grew up in a world that was very different from the one that he grew up in, or that the one that his grandkids are growing up in. And part of it, I don't think, and part of it, I think, goes beyond political ideology, and it gets to development. You're
yeah.
an indigenous guy
Yeah.
who canoes to fish every day, and all of a sudden, like an economic shift to where you have to participate in this, or otherwise you're kind of a hermit.
Right.
That's a huge shift. Having things like television come in, and kids seeing TV for the first time, being I think there were a lot of grievances probably that kind of all got tied into
But but they
an
wanted
anti-Sandinista sentiment.
but did they want the development? They were pro-development.
They wanted, well, I don't want to speak for all
I mean,
indigenous groups, and I don't
him.
even want to speak for this particular indigenous group, but
Okay.
he certainly
Yeah.
viewed the development as kind of a net negative.
Oh.
The younger generation tended to be the opposite, and this was, when I went there to this one particular kind of capital of an indigenous group. um, they were setting up a TV for the first time. It was the first time any of the kids on the island um, had seen a television, and I was just like, it was like watching, that scene with the Coke bottle falling from the sky,
Right. Right.
and just this kind of
Aw.
awe and
Yeah.
wonder, and just, whoa, what is it? Whoa, I just got a sense. Oh, okay, this is the beginning of something, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't know how it's going to end.
Right.
But and I remember meeting youngsters who at the time I felt kind of disdainful of, because they were trying to prove to me that they were like sufficiently technologically, with it, that they were all on the internet, and I'm kind of thinking, oh, that's kind of lame. I thought you guys weren't going to be on the internet, kind of as a basically a tourist, at that moment in time, just kind of wanting to see something else, I guess.
Right.
Um, so you
Yeah.
had different
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
wanting different people to be
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
It was kind of a weird meta experience.
So,
But
yeah.
you know, all of that to say, all of those issues ultimately, in that time, and then later in reality, they crystallized in my mind as kind of an anti-Sandinista sentiment. And then later in 2018, when there actually was a coup in Nicaragua, um, that those same kind of, all-encompassing lists of grievances that were basically chucked at the government, regardless of whether it was their fault or not, or whether the alternative would be 10 times worse. None of these questions were ended up really being asked. um,
Hmm.
by by international observers, certainly, and by many people in the country. Um, but yeah, so I'm getting ahead of the story here a little bit. But um, later on down the road, uh, I had I had a gig. It was back in the United States. I was living in Oregon at the time, and I 2015, I think, or no, 2014. Um, I ended up forming well, I was working with a um how do you call this even I'm
Now
totally
I'm
blanking
nervous.
there. Um, a canvas shop. That's the name of it. Sorry, a canvas shop.
Okay.
So in I was living in Portland, Oregon for about a year, and they have in Oregon the state constitution is pretty malleable, and you can get all these ballot initiatives on the
Oh,
vote every
oh
year
yeah.
by getting a
Yeah.
certain number of signatures. And so I worked for
You were a
uh,
canvasser?
a canvas shop
I
that
did
was
that. It's the
yeah,
worst. It's the worst job in the world.
it's pretty terrible. And I was, but I will say we were trying to get a bill that was going to legalize marijuana on the
Oh,
ballot. So that was very easy to get people to sign up for in Oregon. It was not a tough sell.
Wyatt, I got to tell you something. I was living in Oregon myself 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I started smoking weed again thanks to you.
It's probably my fault. Yeah,
No, I give credit. Hello. No, you get the credit for that. Thank you
yeah.
for thank you for legalizing weed so there's dispensaries on every block now in Oregon.
Well, this is we're gonna get into the woods, the
In the
weeds
weeds?
here, but but
Uh-huh.
there were actually two ballot initiatives,
Oh,
and
right.
ours was the one that was gonna basically let you grow however much weed you wanted.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the other one was the one I think that passed, which was kind of the serious
Oh,
grown-up bill. And so I think our bill probably would have been more of a crowd favorite among the stoner crowd. Theirs was more built for ease of passage in the legislate, and
right,
on the ballot, and
right.
making sure that the legislators would get behind it.
Wow.
But our bill, as it became clear it was not going to get on the ballot, the guy funding this canvas shop began to do some bizarre financial maneuvers and stopped paying us and started blaming
Oh,
some kind of money transfer issue at different banks because someone in Europe was purchasing some business asset of his, and the story kept changing. And so after about a week of that, my colleagues and I got together and we decided to form a union for canvas workers. And
oh, oh my.
and we got some help from the IWW. So shouts out to the industrial workers of the world.
Yep.
Um, and we ended up getting most of the workers there to join. They fired all of us, which I guess we could have seen that one coming.
Was smart to do.
Well, until it bit them in the ass when
Oh, okay.
we got a lawyer appointed by the National Labor Relations Board, and we got a settlement from them because it was very clearly
Right,
uh, retaliation.
right, right.
So that being said, and now I think it's 10 years, I don't think the statute of limitations applies anymore.
Right.
I moved back to Nicaragua and was able to use this very small amount of money
Oh,
in unemployment that I was being paid by my
oh.
terrible. Maybe we can cut this part later. But anyway, I
I mean, wait, why is this
I
bad?
don't know. It's just like using public benefits in a way that you're not intended to.
You mean supporting a socialist revolution in a third world country like that thing?
Well, just living outside the country.
Oh, leaving.
Yeah,
Taking
I
the money and
was
then leaving.